Welcome to the Lead the Room podcast, where we help those with great ideas and brilliant minds to become amazing leaders and build teams full of purpose, connection, creativity and courage, transforming people's experience of workplaces and leadership. In 2018, we decided that the leadership playbook we saw around us wasn't working for the needs of our teams and our organisations, or frankly for us. So we ripped it up, built a new one, and watched the incredible impact that came from leading in a completely countercultural way. This journey transformed our experience of work, team culture, delivery, and felt so good to us. And our approach has served us and our teams in the good times and the tough times alike. So now we're here to share our stories and experiences with you all so you can become the leader you want to be. Build teams that deliver amazing things in amazing environments and inspire those around you to do the same. You and your leadership are what our workplace and people desperately need. We'll be laughing, crying, and learning together. So let's get started.
Bryony, take us back to your first leadership role. Did you want to try and do absolutely everything?
Listen, I still struggle with this, Lindsay. Yes, absolutely. Like, how long have we known each other? Why is this even a question? Like, of course I did, because I've never met anyone more productive or efficient than me. And so I'm like, well, if I can do it, I should be doing it. I should just get it done. Like, I can do it quicker in exactly the way I want, exactly in the right way that I want it, like lined up, with all the other things. Can do it all myself. I don't need anybody else. I'll just crack on and do it. Yeah, 100%.
Yeah. And how, obviously we'll come on to this episode, this podcast is speaking about kind of exactly what we shouldn't be doing. And we know that, but how did that feel like the first time that somebody said to you, it's maybe not all for you to do, Bryony. This is like a bit of a team effort. Do you remember how that felt?
Well, I guess it felt uncomfortable, because it's really, it made me think, well, just because I can do something, should I do it? And like you said, like, what's the impact on the team of me doing all of the things and taking that responsibility away from them? Like, because I can do this process because I used to do it in another role, does it mean that in this role now I should still do it? And so it made me uncomfortable, but not in like the kind of way I want to ignore, but in the way that, like, the way that draws you into curiosity, like, oh, maybe I could be doing things differently here. I didn't even realize there was another way.
Yeah. So when I think back to kind of that first kind of being prepared to be a leader, or that kind of first courses and things we went on, I remember obviously that the buzzwords about being a micromanager or giving maybe too much autonomy, that you were pretty much an absent manager. But in terms of like, that is a sweet spot to find, that kind of balance. And I don't really remember anyone ever kind of helping me or guiding me to find that spot. That was just a go and find it out, and if you figure it out, kind of well done type thing, which is why we probably, in our experience and all the people that we've worked with in organizations, you see a lot of this, don't you? And the balance is really hard to find.
Yeah, I completely agree. And I think that when I think back to those early role models I had, I can really think of very few examples of people who did find that sweet spot, who didn't like completely abandon me as a member of staff and say like, right, do these 7 things over the next 3 months, get on with it, see you in 3 months. Or who was like on me all the time, like, where's the update? What's going on? Or stepping in because I wasn't, much like myself, I wasn't doing it in the way that they wanted or whatever. And so I just feel like I didn't really have models around me to look at and to copy and to emulate. Yeah. And so I guess a question that I wish I'd asked much earlier in my career is, how do I create a culture in my team where this group of people can accomplish like all the things that we set out to do in a really fun and a kind of productive way, but without me having to take on all of the responsibility for doing it, without me feeling like almost crushed under the weight of accountability because I'm not sure on any given day if the things are actually going to be delivered that I've said to my boss and to my team, like my, seniors,
Yeah.
these things are going to be delivered.
Yeah, and that is hard because it almost goes against. I think we were similar, Bryony, when we first started out in our leadership careers. Like, I was definitely told that your role as a leader is to kind of be that buffer. You are that person who kind of shields the team from all the other rubbish that's going on, all the kind of corporate stuff, the stuff that's not their focus, not their day-to-day job. So you are that buffer. So you're kind of shielding that from them. But also, that immediately creates this kind of relationship that's almost like a parent child, like, oh, don't worry, I'll protect you from all this stuff. So instantly, you're not even treating them like adults, are you?
Couldn't agree more. And I think this is one of the biggest mistakes that I see in the workplace is that, like,
Mm.
hierarchy and roles of, like, seniority, people like adopt this like parenting approach to their
Yeah,
staff. I'm
yeah,
like, no, these people are adults. Like, I don't want
yeah,
to be treated like a child myself. And I am expecting you to adult yourself when you come in
yeah.
the door, right? Like, if you say you're going to do something, you do it. Like, I've got my kids at home and they're wonderful, but I'm not expecting to have show up as your work mum. I do not like being made your work mum.
No, and it's so true. And I think linked with that kind of that being that buffer and protecting people, there's also another reason that people often go to that micromanagement bit and doing it all themselves is because we don't trust the people in our team.
Yeah.
Like, that's
And that's,
huge.
yeah.
Is
And
that
that's
you, Bryony?
Oh yeah, yeah. Yeah, exactly. That's why I still like, I'll do all of the things because I'm like, I just want to get it done and then I can tick it off the list and I can
Is
trust it will
that
be done.
but is that a trust in ability or trust that it'll just get done?
Oh, these days it's much more about just want to get it done. Like,
Get it
how
done.
much
Yeah.
I love ticking things off the to-do list. But I think more
Yeah.
commonly, like you say, in workplaces, you see these leaders who just don't feel able to trust that their team are going to come through on the commitments
Yeah.
that they've made to them. Like, so I think that's what we're going to explore today, isn't it? It's like,
Yeah.
how do you really have this discussion about goals and accountability in a way that really is not just about KPIs and like, did you hit this quarterly indicator? Who, like, oh, because I was going to say who cares? Obviously we care. Like, you should hit your quarterly indicators. But if that's all you're focusing on, you're missing out on so much more of the conversation and so much more for your team, because
Yeah.
the framework that we've got is much more about, like, yes, use those, like, build this culture of goals and accountability to drive purpose, but also use it to drive connection and creativity and unlock courage in your team. And so the framework that we've developed is much more about taking a holistic approach and finding that real sweet spot between not being the micromanager, not being the absent manager, but being like the leader who allows everyone to show up as adults, take responsibility, and have team accountability between you all. So you're all pulling equal weight to get things done.
Yeah. And I definitely think if Bryony and I look back across all the teams that we've worked with, that we've kind of, the leaders that we've worked with, that common thread that we can absolutely see through those teams they do deliver, they're incredibly accountable to each other, is that sense of collective responsibility, right, Bryony? That they
Yes.
all, no matter who you go to in the team, whether it's the team, like no matter what your role or responsibility in that team, they all tell the same story about what they're trying to
Mhm.
do, but also why they're trying to do it. Like, that is so, so important. That connection between what you're doing and why you're doing it, the clarity and the focus that leads to accountability within their team, it is huge. But also, it's also that connection, like you said, Bryony. This is not just about, yes, they get the outputs, yes, they get the delivery, but this is about building that connection because they are all feel responsible. There's no parent child. It is that equal responsibility, right?
So, yeah, just thinking about that, Lindsay, and taking it a step further, like, how can people be accountable and responsible for delivering things if the
Mm.
goals aren't clear? Like so if you haven't set them up for success, or you haven't set yourselves up for success as a team by being really clear on what it is that you're trying to do, where it is you're trying to get to, and how can people be responsible? And so, you know, I was really thinking about this time when I took on the leadership of this team, and it was kind of coming out of the pandemic, and we get together and I say, like, well, what are we all working on? Like, what's our shared purpose? Like, what do you think that you are responsible for over the next quarter? And like, none of them could give me a clear answer. Like, their focus was pulled in 10 different directions. They all had really big and really busy portfolios responsible for a lot in and of themselves. And you know, they're too stretched over too many things. So of course, like, they weren't really delivering any like big impacts because they had no focus, they had no clarity. And so I just said to them, right. And so then the other thing was that they were all working as individuals. So each one had the focus for their priority in their bit of the portfolio, and they were really working in silos. And none of it was like, you know, competitive or like intentional. It was just like they needed something to control to feel safe, that like, okay, I at least feel like I can do a little bit of this thing. Like, this is how I'm going to create safety for myself, by just like working on my own against this broad set of things, like tactically answering the emails or doing projects that people ask me to do or whatever.
But that's
And so,
so common, isn't it, right, Bryony?
yeah,
When we think
so
about
common.
the amount of times when I will have said to people, oh, like in their team, like, oh, you're sat next to Bob. Oh, what does Bob do in your team? Oh, I'm not sure. What do you
Yeah.
mean you're not sure what Bob does? Like, you should always like that's. But how often does that happen? And
Yeah.
probably some of our listeners are thinking, yeah, actually, I don't know what Gail in my team does. Like, what does she do, or what is Bob doing? Like, that's mad. But like you
Yeah.
say, so that what your experience there is not unique, is it? And perhaps no fault of those individuals.
No, absolutely not. It was like a fault of, you know, it's a fault of leadership and a fault
Yeah,
of, like, you know, the team like design, right? And so the
exactly.
first thing I said to them is, I got us all together and I was like, right, none of you really know what you're doing. Like, I've just joined. I'm also not 100% clear either. So
Hmm.
let's just like figure this out together. Let's each pick three
I love
things
that.
that we're going to focus on, give ourselves some measures of success of like, or what definitions of done, like what done looks like at the end of 3 months. And let's just do those three things each. Let's think
Yeah,
about how we're going to support each other. Now, they may not be the right things. We may get to the end of the 3 months and we find out like 2 out of 3 were not the right things, but at least we will have found some focus, found some purpose, and we'll be working together to deliver those
yeah,
things. It's a start, right? And you've
yeah,
got like, with this kind of stuff, if you listening are in this situation as a leader, you just got to start somewhere. Like, don't aim for perfection, because you won't get there. Like, this is an iterative process. That's really what I took from that experience.
yeah, definitely. So I'm just interested as well in terms of like the reaction that you got from, because also the reactions you got from your team, because you're a new leader rocking up to you and going, none of you know what you're doing. Like, I would be like, there's a part of me, I think, in my values as well, that be a bit defensive, like, I know exactly what I'm doing, excuse me. But it's not a criticism of them. Like you said, this is a failure of process, of leadership, of any kind of system in place to give these people purpose, which, like we've
Yeah,
spoken before, like without a purpose, pack up and go home.
exactly. And I think it wasn't sort of saying it to them in a sense like, you don't know what you're doing.
Yeah,
It's more like, you've all said to me that you
yeah,
feel confused. You've all said to me that you don't know what your priorities are.
yeah,
Like,
yeah,
let's figure this out together. So it's really coming in as like a guide, a coach, you know, a
yeah,
mentor alongside them, being supportive and present for them when they need you, but not being overbearing, and definitely not like, you know, calling them out or anything like that. That and I think that really helped them open up and be like, yeah, I am confused. Like,
yeah.
please help me sort out this confusion. Let's sort it out together.
Yeah, yeah. And
Yeah.
also by you saying, look, I'm new, I'm not really sure what I'm doing here, I'm confused. You're immediately building that connection, aren't you?
Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah. So
exactly.
again, you've got that kind of your focus is absolutely about what your outputs, what you were trying to achieve, but there was such an amazing opportunity there to build that connection in that moment. Love that. Okay, so Bryony, that's a wonderful example and it all sounds great. But for listeners thinking, okay, I want to do that. I'm in exactly that position. It's a bit of a mess. But again, how do I start to do this? Kind of guide me through it. Then we have got in our 90-day leadership refresh pack that you can download. If you rate and review our podcast here, then we will send it to you for free, and it's full of amazing stuff to guide you through this, and it will take you that step-by-step approach for you to apply this for whatever problem that you are facing with your team at the moment.
Yeah, exactly. Like it's got a whole guide of like what you want to do before, how you review performance and quarterly goals as a team, how you set up goals for the next quarter, how you're going to follow up afterwards, guiding you through every step of the way. So yeah, do go, if you want to rate and review the podcast, we're going to send you it for free, and it's an amazing resource.
Absolutely.
But let's get into some practical advice for people who haven't downloaded that right now, Lindsay. Like, what are the things they can take away and put into practice this week with their team to start building that culture of accountability and bringing focus and clarity to their team?
Yeah, definitely. So there's some really quick wins, Barney, aren't there? And I think if you listen to our intro episode for this podcast, you'll know that Bryony and I said that we absolutely see leadership as something that should be fun. Leading a team should be fun, and that kind of playful, experimental approach that you can bring in. And this is exactly what you can do with this work. This hasn't got to be hard, dry accountability, KPIs, like Bryony said. They are important, but it can be fun. So one really quick thing you can do is in your team meetings, bring in like an approach that gets everyone in the team to share a win and woe of the week. So something that they're really celebrating, something that maybe hasn't gone so well. Instantly, that opens the floor. It creates that space, Bryony, doesn't it, to have that accountability. So everyone is sharing something. You're moving away from that creeping death of that meeting. Everyone shares something, which turns into people justifying their jobs, which no one cares about. And that, but it's an actual, people are focused on, okay, what's gone well, but also what's not gone well. And we're all sharing and creating that. And it removes that kind of feeling of the leader asking that, being that kind of micromanaging, but well, what are you doing, Bryony? What are you doing, Lindsay? And it really it serves as an opportunity to build that connection, because it's amazing what people share. Gives you an opportunity to share a bit about yourself as well. You get to learn about stuff about people in your team. People potentially could be a bit vulnerable in that moment, particularly with the woes, something they might not have shared, particularly in that forum, had you not created that structure and that environment for them to do that in. So it seems when we're speaking about it, some of these things are really basic. They're not difficult, complex things, but as Bryony says, you've got to start somewhere. And this is a great one to start on, isn't it, Brie?
Yeah, exactly. And what I really like with this is that then you have that conversation, you share the win, you share the woe. And then next week, or when you bump into the staff member, you can be like, oh, hey, like you said you were going to follow up, or you said this thing, like you can follow up on that in some way. Or like, oh, you said you were struggling with this part of the project. Like, who else could help you with that? And again, that way you're like leaning in to support them as a leader.
Exactly.
You're not micromanaging, but you're also just introducing that bit of accountability. Like, you trusted me to share this information with me. I'm now following up to make sure that like I'm supporting you to deliver in the best way that you can. So I really like that.
Yeah. What about another one, Bryony?
So I think the next thing that you can do is to really make sure that you're talking about goals in your one-to-ones. And so look, there are a million goal setting templates on Canva and on Google. Like, you can go and Google them on your own time. But what we're really talking about here is the conversation around goals, the conversation around the projects that your staff members doing, and how you have it. So really talking about and making space in your one-to-ones for like, what are they finding hard with this project? Like, where is the growth for them? And you can even phrase it like that. So it's not like them feeling like, oh gosh, I don't want to share that. Actually, I'm really struggling with this. You could just ask them, like, what are you finding stretching? What have you learned in the last week when you've been doing this work? Like, what have you learned? And then that way it's like an easier way into a conversation around like, oh, I can maybe hear that you're struggling with this. Like, what do we do to help you get back on track? And again, that is all just building in accountability, but also support to that staff member to deliver the thing that they said they wanted to do. And let's face it, like they probably do want to do it. They just may be having some struggles doing it, like we all do.
Yeah, definitely. And I think the third one that we can leave you with is around sharing. And I think this one really kind of speaks to me with kind of generosity being one of my values, because I
Yes.
just think, again, one of the things I really hate is people holding on to that information. So we create these goals and they get stored away in some corporate website and people visit them now and again. But no, they should be shared. Everyone should know what the next person in their team is working on and what they're trying to work towards, because we are a team. This is a team effort. We should be helping each other. But again, by sharing those goals with each other, and there's lots of different formats you can do that in. You can have a team meeting. You can bring them all to your team meeting. You email them around. There's loads of ways you can do that. But it just creates that transparency of, okay, oh, now I feel a bit more relaxed. I know what everyone's doing. But also it builds that accountability. So we know exactly what Bryony is kind of charged with being responsible for. Okay, I know she's working on that. But also, like Bryony said, there's an opportunity there to be like, okay, oh gosh, I know a bit about that. Maybe I could help support you on that. So again, it's not just about you're responsible for that. So if you don't deliver it, there's going to be blame here. No. The point of sharing it is that transparency and building that support network within the team to do that. And that feels really empowering as a leader. And really cool to be part of a member of team that actually does that. I haven't seen many teams who actually share their goals, all of them. I've seen it leaders sharing their goals with the rest of the team to be like, hey, this is what I'm responsible for. But everyone collectively sharing their goals, that is not something that I see much of, Bryony. What about you?
No, me either. But I think when I started doing this, what I noticed happening was a whole load of creativity opening up in the team, because
Yeah.
as people knew like what each other were responsible for, exactly like you said, they're like, oh, hey, I had a similar thing experience here, or I've got some knowledge over there, or let me connect you to this person, or you know what, I've got an idea for a different way. And
Right.
it's amazing to see then all the creativity that opens up just by
Yeah.
being transparent, like you say. So,
And it's organic, isn't it? I think
yeah,
that's the wonderful thing. There's something really organic about that, and it's not forced in terms of support and creativity. So yeah, three
yeah,
things there for you to try out this week.
yeah.
Don't
And
delay.
none of
Just
them,
have a
yeah,
go.
don't delay
Don't
by
delay.
today.
Come
No.
on.
I love that. Don't delay. Um, but I think none of them, like all of those, are like small things, easily manageable. And I think
Yeah,
that's the message with this podcast and this, lead the room. It's like
definitely.
almost all of the things that we're sharing with you, the tips, the advice, like they are small actions that you can take today, that you can take in the next week, that don't require a ton of effort and big shifts. But over time, as you start making these small shifts, it's going to mount up to a whole ton of change and transformation, and a whole different culture for your team, and a whole different mindset for you as a leader. So really encourage you to give that a go.
Yeah, and I think that was a really good point on the mindset, Bryony, because had someone given me this advice, these tools, these techniques to try out with my team, that balance between being that micromanager and being that kind of absent, or just you've got so much autonomy, just get on
Yeah.
with it. I would have much more, it would have been much easier to find that balance if I actually had these tools. I wouldn't have been as desperately trying to find that balance, because this makes it for you. This finds
Yes,
the balance for you, doesn't it?
exactly. Right. Well, Lindsay, let's wrap up with our walk the weeks.
Yes.
So tell us about one thing that you are celebrating this week, Lindsay.
So I actually, in kind of preparation for this, I thought one of the meetings that I'm involved in, it's definitely not, there's very little accountability, I would say, as part of it. And it's one of those creeping death, quite competitive, like who's got the longest shopping list, who's got the longest to-do list. And I purposely go into that meeting with like 2 things on my list. And people look at me as if be like, oof, she's not very busy. Well, that's not really the point of it, right? So I, again, offered perhaps rather than like sharing our to-do lists, because I'm not really interested in Jane's to-do list, but what I am interested in, what is Jane responsible for and where could I help her? So I suggested perhaps we ditch the shopping lists, and move away from that. And actually it has been surprising, even just in the first kind of like, we've had 2 meetings, the people that I thought were going to be the easiest to, the ones that would be quite open to sharing, are the ones that have been quite protective. So I want to dig into that maybe next week in terms of what's going on there. But again, it's a start. None of these things are going to be instant successes, because people are people, aren't they? But you've got to go with it. And like Brian and I said, persistence. Stick with it. Have the idea. Be persistent and see where it goes. So yeah, I'm really chuffed with. It would have been easy to sit back and just let the shopping lists continue, but I'd had enough.
I love that. Celebrating the start. Really, really important.
Yeah. How about you, Bryony?
So this week I'm celebrating having a really great away day with my team. And so we took the whole day out of the office and we got together, and I said, I want everyone to bring their biggest pain point. Like, that's all we're going to like talk about. Like, we've got so much to celebrate, and we've done a whole big, like, celebration of the last, couple of months together. But for this one, I want us to bring your biggest pain point, and then I also want you to think about a team pain point. And so that's what we did. That's what we did. Like, we just, in a really organic way, we spent the whole day talking about pain points, how we can learn from others' experience, like brainstorming some different ideas, thinking through how the team pain points impact us all differently and what we can do to make things better. We came up with a set of actions and like new things we're going to try out, and off we go. It was great.
Brilliant. That's such a great, and it's such a great example for our leaders listening, in terms of if you want a slightly different way to extract different information from a team away day. Such a good one, isn't it? So yeah. Well done. What about learning? What you've been learning this week, B?
What have I been learning? Well, other than the away day, I've had 2 really meeting packed days, and it's just like these things happen from time to time, and sometimes, like, I do really try and manage this, but sometimes it just happens. But I just don't like it. Like, it throws me off balance, because I feel like all I'm doing is spending time in like pseudo productivity stuff, like in meetings talking about the work, not doing the work, like not doing the thing that is actually going to help me deliver the priority or deliver my team's purpose, just talking about it. And it just, I really don't like it, because I get frustrated and like antsy, And so I guess that's my learning, is like, so for next week, I really want to make sure that I'm prioritizing some big blocks of time where I can just do my deep work, focus on the things that the team and me really need to get done, like bigger picture thinking, getting the work done, not just talking about doing the work. But what about you? What have you been learning, Lindsay?
So I think this week a big learning point for me is about not acknowledge that I can't fix everything. And this is not just an in work. This is also a bit of an outside of work thing as well. Like, I'm definitely a fixer, or want to be a fixer, and you can't fix everything. So that's one of the things. And actually, when I reflected at the end of the week of like perhaps how much time and energy I had used up almost just trying to think about what I could fix, or how could I fix that, or how could I help that person? Sometimes you can't. Like, you're not, and you're not responsible for fixing everything. One thing I have learned though is I am responsible for fixing perhaps how much highlighter I have on my face, because it's quite shiny. So perhaps I could fix that. So that is one thing that I can. Maybe that'll be a growth bit for next week. Put less highlighter on my face.
You look wonderful. You look
tired mother.
I think,
so yeah, fixing.
But that is such, for me, this is like an ongoing lesson, like identifying the things that really need my time and energy to fix, that only I can fix, and that only I'm responsible for fixing. And it really comes back to that boundaries thing that you've been talking about the last few times, isn't it? Around like actually knowing when to put things down and say, no, this is not my responsibility, it's somebody else's.
Absolutely. And what about your growth then, Bryony? What are you experimenting, growing with this coming week?
Well, so I'm experimenting with this new app to just help me manage, like, I'm calling them Well, I'm going to say mental models, but that does sound a bit buzzwordy, Lindsay.
Well,
So
I'm going to say, what does that mean?
okay, so we're
Calling
not
you
going
out.
to go. You're calling me out. We're not going to go with mental models.
No.
I guess it's managing like the self-talk that I'm, the self-talk in my mind,
Okay. Yeah.
because I like sometimes I suffer from anxiety, and I've noticed recently that like I've just been feeling a little more on edge and like catching some of my self-talk, and I'm like, this isn't kind, that this isn't compassionate, this isn't like inner cheerleader cheering me on.
Yeah.
This is like inner worst critic, like calling me out, and I don't need that in my life. And so I've downloaded this app. It's like a 60-day program. I'm going to give it a go. And I'm like, again, with that approach of like experimentation, start a new habit. We'll see what happens. Like maybe it helps, maybe it doesn't, but we'll see.
Yeah. And I think the really important thing is like you have recognized how that's impacting you, how it's making you feel, and you're doing something about it. Because so often we're just like, that's just the way I feel. But actually, we can do things about it. But I'm finding you for a buzzword, so sorry. You've got to find me.
Okay. Yeah. What about, all right, Lindsay. What have you been doing to grow this week?
I have been thinking more about kind of doing less but better. So I've definitely
so
found,
good.
and this kind of, suppose, not just connected to saying no to things at work and outside of work, but the things that I am doing, like just doing them like better. Because I just feel like on so many things at the moment, and maybe particularly, I don't know, since becoming a parent, I just feel like I skim the surface on lots and lots of things. And things that I used to be like, I like to spend a lot of time doing that, or not even necessarily time, but really doing it well, like things like cooking or baking or whatever it is, and really taking my time to think about intentionally before I go into work and how I'm going to show up for that meeting. And I just feel at the moment I'm literally almost just chasing myself before I go into these situations. There is no need. Like, I do have the time. I just need to kind of do less things. So, but again, that's intentional. I need to sit down. So this week I'm like, okay, as part of that growth, I'm going to sit down. I'm just going to plan it out. And actually what that will mean is some things will fall off, but that's absolutely fine, because and they might pick up next week. But do less better is kind of, because I know how it'll make me feel if I'm doing it just a wee bit better.
Oh, good for you, because it's really countercultural to do that though, isn't it? When you've got all these competing demands and you feel like, you want to meet everyone's needs, but then when are you meeting your own needs, and when are you finding that enjoyment in life? So I really support you in this, Lindsay. I'm here for you.
And and it's all those memes online which are like, oh well, just do these things, just get up an hour earlier before your child. No, my child wakes up at 5 a.m. I'm not getting up I'm already up at 4 a.m. with the anxiety of starting the day. I'm not getting up at 3. Like, what?
No,
I'm not doing that.
No, less sleep is not the answer.
No.
So I can't wait to hear how you get on.
Absolutely.
And also, can't wait to hear how you listeners get on with putting into practice the tips that we've shared this week on building accountability and clarity into your teams. So send us a DM over on Instagram, drop us a comment on the YouTube, or send us an email to hello@leadtheroom.co.uk. And we really look forward to hearing how you've got on.
Yeah, and don't forget to rate and review us, send us your rate and review, and we will send you your free 90-day leadership pack. We'll see you next week.
See you next week.
Bye. A team full of purpose and results, people who are buzzing with ideas and the courage to try them out, and a place where you and the team can't wait for the weekly meeting. By listening to this episode, you are building your skills to become the leader that can make all of this and more happen. But we want to hear from you. Tag us in your stories, send us a DM about your walk the week on Instagram so we can learn what's resonating with you most. And if you're up for helping us out and taking a moment to rate and review the podcast, send us a screenshot to hello@leadtheroom.co.uk so we can send you our 90-day leadership refresh as a thank you. Keep experimenting, and we can't wait to see you next week.